Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 19th annual Six Bridges Book Festival, sponsored by the Central Arkansas Library System and the Arkansas Humanities Council. I'm Heather Register Zabindin, the Programs and Website Coordinator for the Bobby L. Roberts Library of Arkansas History and Art. Thank you for joining us today. Please type your questions that you have for the author in the chat, and we'll ask those questions of Emma at the end of our discussion. So today we're talking to Emma Kennedy, editor and author of Letters from Brenda, 2 Suitcases, 75 Lost Letters, One Mother. Emma is an author, screenwriter, actress, and presenter. She wrote the BBC series The Kennedys, an adaptation of her best-selling book, The Tent, the Bucket, and Me. In addition to winning the Radio Times comedy competition, she has also won Celebrity Master Chef and is a Guinness World Record holder. Emma, thank you so much for being part of the Six Bridges Book Festival. I have so many things to ask you. I really kind of don't know where to begin, and we had a great pre-chat. So
we did.
Why don't we start with a reading?
Yes, sure.
So why don't you read that introduction to your book starts with, I want to tell you a story about.
I will do. Yeah, I will do. And hello, everybody. And please ask loads of questions because I love questions. I want to tell you the story of my mother. When she died, I was a mess, caught in a riptide of grief I had no chance of escaping. But by small degrees, I found myself floating out of it. I wasn't quite sure what to do next. Grief does funny things to you. It makes you wary and desperate, as if you found yourself in an unwanted friendship with someone who is overly needy. It demands things of you, forcing you to lay bare a life, cradle to grave. It requires you to stare at a person under an unflinching light. Grief is a terrible burden. It has taken me 7 years to be able to write this book. It is a story of a girl, a teenager, a woman, a wife, a lover, a mother. It's a story that involves betrayal, bigamy, disappointment, a suicide attempt, affairs, love, passion, and fury. My mother and I had a complicated relationship. She was difficult and volatile, but I knew that wasn't the whole story. In fact, I realized I didn't really know her story at all. I had no idea what I would find when I lifted the rocks of her life. I hadn't intended to do it, but a sudden, unexpected call from my father changed all that. This book is the story of Brenda.
I love that statement, lift the rocks of her life, because we do. We
do. Yeah.
So that unexpected call from your father about 2 suitcases of letters that Brenda had written to you.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that discovery.
Okay, so it was 3 years after my mother died. And as I say in the introduction, I had a very difficult and complicated relationship with my mother, primarily because I was convinced that she had had an undiagnosed mental illness for all of her life. And that was sort of had been the great question mark that had hung over us whole time. And so I can compartmentalize my relationship with her. When I was a child, I was terrified of her because she was very volatile. She was unpredictable, and you didn't know whether you were getting good Brenda or bad Brenda on any given day. Then in my 20s, I resented her because of what had happened in my childhood, and that terror has to manifest itself somehow. And then it was in my 30s that I began to slowly realize that she wasn't awful, she was ill, which is a very different thing. And so from sort of that point onward and into my 40s, I started to have a better understanding of her and a better relationship with her. But when she died, things happened on the day that she died that really damaged me. And I was left with just lots of unanswered questions that I didn't know how to deal with. And I couldn't cope with her dying. I think this is something that if you have lived with somebody who has a mental illness, there's a sort of an element of Stockholm syndrome that comes in. It's you're almost you're trapped. It controls you. It is a very controlling environment that you're working in and living in. And when that suddenly goes, it just lifts like boom, like a fairy godmother has come and just flashed a wand. It's gone. The weight of it is gone, and it takes you a long time to work out what to do with that, because you feel guilty because she's died, and that's it. You never have to deal with mad bad Brenda ever again. You're never going to feel the way that made you felt ever again. You feel relief that I mean, certainly in her circumstance, you know, she was dying of cancer, so she had a lot of pain, she had a lot of suffering. You're relieved that that's over for them, and that sort of two combination, and you're also grieving. So it's sort of that combination of things, the guilt, the relief, and the grief, all combined into sort of this cauldron of really impossible feelings. And it felt really difficult and heavy. But I was mostly left with that feeling of, I know something was wrong with my mum, but I don't know what. And I'll never find out. And then Dad found the letters. And he had finally decided that he was going to sell the family home. And it was the new owner who found the suitcases upstairs in the loft. And she obviously opened them up and saw that they were personal items, and so rang Dad and said, "Do you want them?" And thank God he rang me, because, you know, thank God she asked, because they could have been just lost. And so obviously I said, yes, I really do want them. So there were 75 letters, and they were all written by her and addressed to me. And I got them, and it took me about a week before I could even sort of summon up the strength to look at them. And then I started to read them, and it was really interesting, because some of them I hadn't seen before, but some of them I had. And that was fascinating to me, because she had obviously gone to my house and found them and taken them back. But I think there's a reason for that, which we may get to later. But in a nutshell, I think she had always wanted to be a professional writer, and I think she regarded those letters as her body of work. And you sort of get a sense of that, don't you, when you read the letters, because the letters, they don't read like letters. Yeah. They read like monologues, or something that you might read in a book. So I read them, and the other thing that happened was that I just started remembering how funny she was. How breathtakingly funny she was. And I've often said about my mother that she was my greatest light and my heaviest burden. And to this day, she is still the most charismatic person I've ever known in my life, and the funniest. I mean, she could have me on the floor crying, laughing in a way that nobody else could. So it was a constant balancing act with her. So I'd read the letters, and I'd started to remember sort of the good Brenda, which I had forgotten about. And I just started to feel like I wanted to reconnect with that, and to finally sort of put to bed all those questions that I'd had. But it took me another 3 years to be able to even think about, start writing about them. And then the pandemic came along, and I just thought, do you know what? This is a weird time. This time is probably never going to come again. It's a time of sort of extreme introspection and just quietening down every other aspect of your life. If I'm ever going to do it, it's now. And so I started the process. So I got them all out again and read them. And I just thought, okay, this is it. I'm going to try and find out what was actually wrong with her. And the brilliant thing was that I got when I finished writing the book, you know, I'm not a clinical psychiatrist. I don't have those qualifications. So it was always going to be just my best guess. And I sort of felt that I'd arrived at a best guess. And then we sent the manuscript off to a clinical psychiatrist just for a check read, really, just to make sure that I wasn't saying anything that was irresponsible or just plain wrong. And he did something that we weren't expecting, because I just thought we would get the manuscript back with a little comment here or a little comment there. But he wrote a letter to me. And in that letter, he diagnoses my mother from having read the book. And it was like the greatest gift. And we asked him if we could publish the letter in the book, and that appears as the epilogue. So when you read the book, you will finally find out what my dear old mum was suffering from. And it's quite shocking.
Yeah. So the letters are hysterical, and your commentary adds to that hilarity. And I also want everybody to know, if you love audiobooks, listen to this as the audiobook, because you read the footnotes. Juliet Stevenson, the actress,
the great Juliet Stevenson,
yes, the great, she reads your mother's voice
she
as
reads
well
the letter,
as your father's voice too.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so, and you interject the footnotes, which brilliant, but it seems that your mother was this consummate storyteller.
Yeah, she was.
Talent you've inherited. So do you have a favorite letter, and would you read it?
Oh gosh, what, in the book? In the book, really? They're very long.
Okay.
They're very long. I mean,
just tell us which one.
I think my favorite letter has got to be when she goes to Prague, because that's like a 3-act film. She loved traveling. She was very miserable at home. She really hated the town that she lived in, even though she was so obsessed with the house that they lived in. She was sort of like Scarlett O'Hara with Tara. That's what my mother was like with the house that she died in. And lived in for most of her life. But because part of her illness involved extreme paranoia, she was given to thinking that, the neighbors were conspiring against her and this and that, and that her phones were tapped and all of this. So being at home for her was actually very stressful, I think. But when she went on holiday, it was just like, that was all out the door, and she was just like, oh no, I like people, and I'm going to have experiences, and I'm going to make the most of them. But she just loved a little bit of drama wherever she went, and I think the Prague letter for me just sums up absolutely everything you ever need to know about my mother. Even down to accosting strangers in a toilet to try and fix some civic plumbing. I mean, it's just unbelievable, that letter. But I should explain for people listening is it's really a detective. Letters from Brenda is really a detective story of me trying to find out what my mother suffered with. But between each chapter, I put a letter that you won't see all 75 letters, but there is a letter from my mother between each chapter. And because a lot of what my mother says is either exaggerated or, I mean, I hate to say fibbing, but there are definitely occasions in the letters where you think, really, Brenda, really? And so I decided to include footnotes to her letters. So that's me interjecting. But Juliet Stevenson, if my mother had known that Juliet Stevenson was going to play her and read out her letters, I mean, she just would have found it absolutely incredible. My mother was sort of born to be famous. She should have been famous. She had that sort of oomph about her. She had that sort of that glow about her. And I think, because circumstance, she came from a very poor family and all of that. I think she didn't get the opportunities that she should have had. But when Tent the Bucket and Me came out, my mother would go and stand in Waterstones, which is a big bookshop chain here in the UK. And she would go and stand next to it. And she would wait for someone to pick it off the shelf. And she'd go, "I'm Brenda from the Tent the Bucket and Me. Would you like me to sign that?" She had nothing to do with it. But she'd like, "Oh, yes, I'll sign that. Yes, that's me. I'm Brenda from the Tent the Bucket and Me." But honestly, she absolutely loved Juliet Stevenson, and it was such a lovely thing for me to do as well. That Julie, I gave Juliet my number, and she would like be texting me, asking me for notes. I mean, can you imagine me giving Juliet Stevenson direction? I mean, please, wow! It's like I'd won the lottery.
It's brilliant. It really, I mean, listening to it, and then your interjection of the footnotes,
it makes it funnier, doesn't it? It makes it funnier.
It really does.
Because she's like, because Brenda's being all, self-important and excited, and I'm just like, no.
Yes.
No. Let's dial this down here, please. Yeah.
And one of my favorite footnotes of yours was when you just said, "No shit, Sherlock." I mean, I was just like,
Sherlock.
Yes, perfect. Yeah. So tell us about growing up with Brenda and Tony.
Okay, so it was hard. It was tough.
And you have siblings, right?
No.
Oh, just you?
No.
Yeah, it's just me.
So my mother, when she didn't want me, she got pregnant by accident on their honeymoon. And this is significant because we sort of need to start back a little bit to look at her childhood to understand why she didn't want to get pregnant at the point where she got pregnant. So my mum came from a really, really poor family, and her mother was Irish and had come over, at a time of terrible deprivation in Ireland, when a lot of Irish people were coming to England to try, and going to America as well, to try and make a better life for themselves. And my grandmother met my grandfather, and they were both simultaneously at the same time running away from home. And so they bonded on that. But here's the twist: they got married very quickly. My grandfather was only 19, and he thought my grandmother was 21. And I found out when I was writing the book that she was 31.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah. Wow. So they got married. My grandfather was a naturist, vegetarian, communist, which is quite the combination. And my grandmother was a natural conservative. So they were clearly very ill matched from the off. But my grandfather was also a womanizer, and he left them when and ran off with another woman when my mother was 11. And I think this had a profound effect on her. She tried to kill herself. She threw herself from an upstairs window. This is not a child who is happy. And my grandmother had a double shame to deal with. So there was the shame of, she was a Catholic, so she couldn't get divorced. So she had the shame of that, but she also had the shame of being Irish, because at the time in the UK, you would see signs up on doors that said, no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. Irish below dogs, So she would pretend she was Welsh in order to sort of stave off the shame. But my mother was brought up in an environment where we have secrets and we have to keep them. And they were just weighed down with shame. And they were very, very, very poor. So my mother when she was 14, actually changed her name to Becky. She started telling people her name was Becky, and that was because she identified with Becky Sharp from Vanity Fair. Now, Becky Sharp is a really interesting character to identify with, because there's two schools of thought on Becky Sharp. Number one, that she's sort of this scheming, horribly ambitious girl who will do anything and everything to sort of stomp over people to get where she wants. Or she is the plucky, poor kid that knows precisely what she needs to do in order to advance her life and pull herself out from the terrible situation that she finds herself in. So I can absolutely understand that my mother, age 14, would identify with the latter, that she was, and she just understood what she needed to do. So she got herself out of the poor circumstances in which she was in, and she got herself to teacher training school, and she had just got herself a really great job as an English teacher, and this is what she wanted. She wanted a career, and this would have been 1966. So in those times, if you were a woman and you got pregnant, that was it. It was the end of it. That was the end of your career. And you would never go back to being allowed to be full-time. You would never get a full-time job again. You might get a bit of part-time work, but your working life was effectively over. And she got pregnant with me on their honeymoon. And so there was that. So the number one, that was it. It was like, I think she was very resentful. It was like, I can't believe this has happened. I don't want to give up my career. My career is the thing that I'm interested in. This is, I don't, at the age of 24, want to be saying, okay, that's it, it's over. The second thing that happened was when I was born, she got postnatal depression. And her mother had died in horrible circumstances. She died of cancer as well, but obviously the cancer, there was no such thing as hospices in those days. No such thing as palliative care in those days. So it was a really awful and traumatic death. And she died 6 weeks before I was born. So she was dealing with grief, shock, and then postnatal depression. So I get it. And then, of course, she had to give up her career. So I think she resented me. I spent most of my childhood thinking, knowing really she didn't like me, which is something that's quite difficult to deal with. And I had a really tricky time with her. It's that thing of, I think children want a couple of things, and one of them is consistency. It's really important. And when you're living with somebody who has a very serious mental illness, and you don't know or understand that because you're a child, and you don't have coping mechanisms because you don't understand it, and you're not allowed to talk to anybody about it, then that is, that's deeply problematic. I mean, I can remember when I was 8 years old and I was in the house on my own with her one time. She got a great big massive carving knife and locked herself in the bathroom. And myself, aged eight, was standing at the door basically asking her not to kill herself. That's a big deal. Yeah. That's a big deal. But also, I don't want people to think, what you had a terrible time. No, see, this is the thing. The flip side was I also had an amazing time with her. She taught me to read at 2. She took me to every single theatre show and musical that she could possibly think. I got to see David Bowie when I was aged 7. I was taken to the seminal Ziggy Stardust gig at the Hammersmith Odeon, which I think is rated as the 3rd greatest concert that ever happened in the whole of history. She took me to Hair when I was 4. We had wild times. She took me to Shakespeare plays in Stratford upon Avon, when I was 6 and up. she was brilliant in that respect. But she also, I mean, you'll enjoy that. This is a funny story. So my mother read Germaine Greer, The Female Eunuch, in 1971. Okay. And from that point onwards, it was down tools. It's that I'm a feminist now. Thank you. And I don't lift a finger. Okay. So my mother, and this is true, and people often ask me whether this is made up. It's not made up. My mother never made me a meal once in my life. She didn't even make me toast. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about this the other day. She didn't even make me a cup of tea. Okay. So there was a week when my father had to go to hospital because he had to have an operation in his ear. And my dad was sort of like my mum. He did all the cooking, he did all the cleaning, he did all the washing of clothes. He was the one who stitched my name into the back of all my PE kit. It was him. He was my mum. He was my mum and my dad. And I was 11 at the time, and I remember I stood in the hallway with my PE kit. PE kit is physical education over here. Yeah. So I had my PE kit in a bag over my shoulder, and I stopped and I stared at her, and it was sort of like a scene from a spaghetti western where you're just standing staring at each other and not saying anything. And I said, okay, I am not looking after you this week. Do you understand? She went, yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I said, I'm not cooking for you. Do you understand? She went, yeah. Okay. So I go off to school, and then I come back, and she's beaming from ear to ear. She's looking like smug, actually smug. And she says, please sit down. Here's your first course, because everything was like fabulous and drama. And she put down in front of me a pot of cockles, which I don't know. Do you know what cockles are? They're sort of like whelks. They're like a small mollusk from the sea. And they were in a pot, and we couldn't get the lid off. So we had to abandon that. We had to just forget that. And then she got me to phone round my friends, and I had to phone a different friend every day, because obviously this was a scam that was only going to work once on it. You couldn't do it twice on the same person. Yes. And I would have to phone up, and I'd be on the phone, and I'd go, did she go, like, don't forget to cry? Okay. I went, oh, my dad's in hospital. Can I come for tea? Can I come for dinner? And then they'd ask their mum, and the mum would go, oh no, Emma's dad's in hospital. Of course she can come for tea. And my mum they'd be nudging me and going, and me. And don't forget, I'm coming too. And they're going, can my mum come as well? And then they would like, yeah, okay, weird, but right, yeah. And then we would go to the house, we would have the supper, and there was one, and I would just be mortified with embarrassment. My mother just thought this was the greatest wheeze she'd ever pulled off in her lifetime. And there was one evening when I would insist on doing the washing up, insist on it wherever we went. And there was one evening, and I looked at her and I said, Mum, because she never got up to help. Right. I said, are you going to help me do the washing up? And she went, Emma, I can't lift a pan. My womb will drop out. And that's who she was. Yeah. That's who she was. I have to confess, I did once I found her standing over a pan on the stove, and it was bubbling. And I remember I walked in and almost sort of froze in my tracks, because I didn't understand what I was seeing. And I walked up and I said, and I looked in and I said, what's she doing? What are you doing? And she went, I am cooking broccoli. And I went, no, you're not. That's parsley. It was parsley.
Parsley, not broccoli. I thought you were going to say
it's that outrageous.
She was giving herself a facial or something.
Yeah, honestly, she was outrageous. She was a one-off, absolute one-off.
So a lot of these letters, or a number of them, are in various places, right? France, Prague. And you've said your mother loved to travel.
Yeah.
There's one letter where she describes herself as an old lady, obviously English speaking, to French station guard in Italian.
Yeah.
But she didn't speak.
I mean, she didn't speak Italian. She didn't speak any languages. And she just did that thing of slightly, I mean, it was extraordinary. So if you were Italian now and she wanted to ask you, you know, where is the train to Milan? She wouldn't say, where is the train to Milan in Italian? She'd go, where is the train to Milan? She would just speak English,
Italian.
but in the accent of wherever she was. It's just unbelievable. Unbelievable.
So later in that same letter, your commentary describes her as beginning an Agatha Christie novel with then horror on the Eurostar.
Yeah.
So, you know,
yes, this is the one. This is the one where she just randomly decided that a man who was on the night train with them, because he was wearing a funny hat, and for no other reason, let's just be quite clear about this, because he was wearing a vaguely strange hat. And when she says strange hat, I mean, it was just something with a peak, a lot, sort of probably not unlike a baseball cap, but with a small brow. I mean, that was it. But on the basis of that, she concluded that he was a spy, an Eastern German spy. It turned out he was from Northern Ireland, but he was an East German spy who had been sent to assassinate her. I mean, that's quite the leap, isn't it, from a funny hat?
Now, she wrote she mentioned these things in the letters, but she also said these things out loud in lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, the one that always sticks out is when she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and we were sitting in a hospital called the Royal Marsden, which is in London, which is sort of the biggest, most important cancer hospital in the UK. And very serious people. I mean, I'm not, all doctors are very serious people, but this is like mega serious people. These are sort of the cutting edge of cancer research and FYI, et cetera, et cetera. And we were sitting there with a consultant, and she told him that she had been given cancer by a CIA operative in a bookshop in Cambridge. And on any metric, that's like, oh, hello, here's the crazy lady. But because my dad and I were so used to that sort of behavior, we didn't bat an eyelid. Mm-hmm. We just thought, oh, she's just being ridiculous again. She's just showing off again. This is just, this is what she does. But what's more shocking to me, actually, now looking back at that, is that the consultant didn't think, oh, that's something that needs to be followed up with a psychiatrist. He probably just thought, oh, she's stressed because she's just been told she's got cancer, and left it at that. Yeah. But this is the other thing, is that at no point in my mother's life were things ever addressed or sorted out by any medical professionals. But I think I once briefly had a conversation with Dad saying, would you ever consider going to your GP and talking about it? And the thing is, absolutely not, because you're terrified that she'll find out you've told. And that's a big part of it, is when you live with someone who can, go 0 to 100 at the flick of a switch, you never want to be the person that flicks the switch, and you don't want to be the person that musters bad Brenda from the depths of hell. You just want to keep an even keel. You just want a quiet life.
Yeah.
So you don't talk, you don't tell. It's really damaging and dark and unhealthy.
Yeah. You talk throughout the book about the silence that accompanied postpartum depression or any mental illness in the 70s.
Mm.
I don't even think we have to stick to the 70s. I think maybe up until, the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about how that silence manifested itself in your daily life as you got older.
Well, again, I think it's that you just want an easy life.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to have to deal with the way the outbursts make you feel, that because they make you feel scared. They drag you back to feeling like you're 7 years old again. It's all of that. It's really complicated. But you just don't want to be around it. That's the thing, I've started working since the book came out. I started working with a charity that helps children who live with a parent with mental illness. And it's really interesting how just the same things come up and again and again and again, that the burden of keeping the secret, and how discombobulating and upsetting it is to be around somebody who is unpredictable.
Mm-hmm.
That, I think that's the thing. But you know what? I was doing another literary festival, and what I've been finding is that after events, lots of people want to come up and talk to me about their experience.
Mm-hmm.
And one woman, she really stuck with me, because she came up to me and she said, it was something I hadn't properly appreciated. And she said, if your mother had ever spoken up about her illness, because like my mother could complain about anything and everything. She could complain about fruit. She could complain about the state of a road. She could complain about service. Anything she could complain about. But the one thing she never complained about was how she felt. In fact, I never had a single conversation with her in the 47 years that I was around her in which she said to me, this is how I'm feeling. Never. Not once. And that just in and of itself is extraordinary.
Yes.
But she said to me, if she had ever told anyone how she felt in the 60s, and it was probably if the mental illness that she had, it would have been manifesting in the 50s as well, in the 50s or 60s, and even well into the 70s. If she'd told anyone, she would have been locked away.
Yeah.
And she would have never had the life that she had. She wouldn't have had the achievements that she had. She wouldn't have had any of the pleasures that she had. Yes, she had to live with a terrible, terrible illness and not tell anyone about it, which now I fully understand it. I can't even believe that she had that going on in her head and actually was able to pretty much lead a normal life with no medication and no psychiatrist, to talk to. I mean, it's just extraordinary.
Yeah.
But she would have been locked away, no doubt about it.
So I'm an only child, you're an only child. A lot of times as my parents age, people say things like, oh, well, you're an only child, you don't have any extra support. And I've created a support of friends. But how do you think being an only child affected? I mean, you don't have siblings, so you can't ever wonder, would have siblings made it easier? But did you have a support system around you at all?
No, nothing.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting thing. Children, which I've learned from the charity I've been working with, children who have a parent with a severe mental illness have a couple of things in common that runs through pretty much, all of them. Number one, they're high achievers.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is you don't ever want to be in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
my God, you do your homework. And that I still have that. Like if I ever feel I'm in trouble, or if I ever feel someone's cross with me, it's like I'm yanked back by a rope to being 7. I can absolutely feel that in myself, but I have that drive to just do well because I want to please people. I've absolutely 100% have got that 100%. And the other thing, which is quite extraordinary, is a phobia called emetophobia. It's really common amongst children who and adults who had a parent with a mental illness. And a emetophobia, if anyone doesn't know, is a phobia of being sick or being around people who are being sick. And it's interesting. I was doing a podcast with a psychiatrist for the children's charity, and I was telling her that because she was saying, do you have anxiety from anything sort of that manifested when you were a child? And I said, well, the one thing I do have is I have emetophobia. And she went, oh my God, so do I. And so do loads of other people I've spoken to. What? It's like, what's going on? And I was telling this story at another literary event, and I heard this woman go, oh my God. And she also had emetophobia, and exactly the same circumstances. It's so weird, isn't it?
Yes, that is. Yes. Wow.
But again, I think it's just about being in trouble, doing something that's not nice.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Talk about your dad.
I mean, he's a saint.
Yeah.
He was sent by angels. He's unbelievable. He's a very calm, quiet, gentle man. And he loved me and still loves me just to the moon and back. I mean, if any of you listening are going to read the book, there's a slight spoiler here. She has 2 affairs. She has 2 affairs in the book. Both of which your jaws are going to be on the floor at the actual things she did. And Dad knew about them. And that was sort of, again, just like me with my grown-up adult head on. I couldn't understand why he stayed with her. And I said to him, why did you stay with her? And I think at the root of it was that he just accepted, and this might be because, this might be a hang up from the 70s, because the 70s was such a weird decade in terms of, sexual liberation, and people weren't just allowed to have affairs, they were expected to have affairs. And if you didn't like it, it's like something wrong with you. It was sort of a weird sexual revolution, 10 years where people got things really wrong, I think. But I think he just accepted that she was very highly sexed, and one man was not going to be able to deal with it. So there was that. But I also think he knew that she really, really loved him. And she did. She really loved him, and he really loved her. And they were best friends. Mm-hmm. And I think that was at the root of it. I think the first affair, he stayed with her because of me, because again, in the 70s, he would not have got custody of me. And if he hadn't got custody of me, I probably would have been dead within a fortnight from malnutrition.
Yeah.
Apart from anything else. But
parsley.
Or from just eating parsley
yes.
or grass. I probably would have been put out like a sheep.
Yes.
Or like she did with her sister when she had to look after her sister, and she told her to go and find berries in the bushes, like she was in Tess of the D'Urbervilles. I mean, it's just insane. Anyway, so I think there was that, but I think that they definitely really, really loved each other. And I remember, there was a little tiny moment when they were both in their 60s, and she'd had all the affairs and all of that and blah blah blah, and come out the other end of it, and Dad was still there, and there was no bitterness or rancor between them. And I had gone with them to IKEA to get a piece of furniture or something, and I was walking just in front of them, and I looked around and realized that they were nowhere to be seen. And I stopped and I thought, where are they? And I saw them sort of just a little way off, and they were both just standing, kissing, sort of kissing each other like teenagers. And I said, what's she doing?
In the middle of IKEA.
Yes. And my mum just said, I haven't kissed your father today.
Oh.
And so, there was real sort of tenderness there, which is really hard to reconcile if you're, for want of a better word, a normal person who thinks that cheating on your partner is really bad. But she just didn't. She just didn't.
Yeah. Well, and
he thought it was fine. It was like, I can do what I like. Thanks. Jermaine Greer has said I can. And that was it.
Yes. Yes. So is there anything about your mother that you haven't told us already that you'd like viewers to know?
Well, I mean, I don't want to give away too much because obviously I want you to read the book, but I think it's the thing that was really important to me was to be fair, because there are, I do reveal some terrible things that she did and said, and her behavior at times is monstrous, and there will certainly be some people who will read it and think, oh my God, this woman's a monster. But she wasn't a monster. She was ill. And I keep coming back to this, is that she wasn't awful. She had a really serious mental illness, and part of which that goes to explaining, the fact that she was highly sexed, the fact that she was incredibly paranoid. She was dealing with all of these things unmedicated and not within the care of a physician, which is just extra. I mean, do you want me to say what she had, I mean, I will happily tell you the diagnosis from the clinical psychiatrist, but if you want
go ahead and share. I mean, it is amazing that she survived, that she lived.
Yeah, she had. Well, I will tell you, he diagnosed her as a schizophrenic. I mean, that is the most serious mental illness you can have, and she was completely unmedicated. It's just blows my mind. But an incredible thing happened. Oh, I'll tell you this story. So Brexit had happened. Okay. Boo, 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 stupid Brexit. Stupid Brexit. It had happened. And I was really pissed off about it because I did not want to give up my status as a European citizen. And I discovered that because my grandmother was Irish, that I could apply for an Irish passport. So this is now the grandmother I never met, who didn't want anyone to know that she was Irish, and now I can't wait to be Irish. I can't be Irish quick enough. So I started that process, and it was. I came up against a significant problem because the birth certificate of my grandmother, my great grandmother, had got the name of her husband wrong. she'd put the names wrong. They were round the wrong way. Okay. The trouble this caused me, I can't even tell you. So I had to get people from a show called Who Do You Think That You Are? I had to get them on board to try and help me to fix this problem. So this was all ongoing. Okay. So after I'd finished, I'd pretty much finished the first draft, and my aunt came, who features throughout the book, my aunt Phyllis. She came to see me, and she told me that she'd been to see a medium. and that Brenda had come through. And I went, oh, come on, please. Please. I don't believe in any of this thing. But she went, no, she came through. She apologized. She said, really? And I thought, shall I go and see her? Just to dot the I and cross the T. And if nothing else, I would just come away with a really funny story. Okay.
Right. Something to add.
So I booked myself in under a false name. I was wearing it was still when we were required to wear masks. So I'm wearing a mask and I've booked myself in under a false name. Okay. I sit down. I go to see the medium. I sit down. Brenda comes through immediately. Absolutely fuming about my dad's new girlfriend. Oh, we've got 10 minutes of literally just hell on earth over her. Woo! And then she goes, and can you believe about the birth certificate? And at that point I went, oh, good God. Oh, I'm going to church. But wow. she said the names are wrong. The names are wrong on the birth certificate, and nobody knew about this.
You knew that, yes. Yeah.
It was freaky. But wow. but one thing happened, whether it's by dumb luck or it was actually Brenda from beyond the grave. She just said, I was misunderstood in my lifetime. And it was like through dumb luck or whatever, it was like a little light bulb went off in my head.
Like you said earlier, I can't even imagine what it was like in her head. No. We have a question from the audience. Did humor help you deal with your mother when you were a child?
Yes, 100%. I think, she was very, very, very funny. She was very funny. She always wanted to be laughing. And it's something that I've now sort of been able to remember and reconnect with, is just the sound of her howling with laughter. She was a very visceral creature. She wanted to feel things extremely. So, she wanted to have people around her who made her laugh. She wanted to have drama. She loved having arguments with strangers. It was, if she met you, she either loved you immediately or she hated you. There was no black or white. And she was sort of a person that when she came into a room, she was like lightning. There was an electricity that filled the room. She had this incredible energy, and she was sort of like, the best way I can describe her is that she was like a wild horse. And if you go into a field and you see a wild horse, and if that wild horse comes up to you and wants to spend time with you, it's the most amazing, incredible, magical experience of your life that you will remember till the day you die. But a wild horse can also rear up and smash your brains in. So that's what we had. That's what we were living with on a constant basis.
And that's why you wanted to keep everything even.
Yes. But there was definitely a lot of, this is the weird thing, that there was terror running through the veins of my childhood and everything. But there was also incredibly ridiculous and funny things that were going on. But in terms of, she was a great, great mother in many, many respects, in terms of instilling in me a sense that nothing was ever going to be handed to me on a plate. And if I wanted to make anything of my life, I had to get up and do it myself. That absolutely came from her. She educated me. She gave me incredible cultural experiences. There was also that, but she was also the woman who forgot my birthday. She just couldn't do the basics. She couldn't do the basics. She could just do the exciting stuff.
Yeah. The fun stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. What dish did you win? We're going to switch a little bit to kind of pop culture, maybe. What dish did you win Celebrity MasterChef?
Okay. So Celebrity MasterChef. So it was 3 dishes.
Mm-hmm.
And the starter was a pea and ham risotto. I made risottos with
That's
a
hard to do.
yes. I made
They always say don't do
made pasta from
risotto.
scratch. Yes, I made pasta from scratch. Yeah,
Wow.
I made like a bacon crust that was crumbled
Yes.
on. It was
Oh.
delicious with like a lemon and sage sauce. That was the starter.
Mhm.
Then I did a pan fried halibut with crushed roasted potatoes that had been cooked in goose fat with a beurre blanc sauce, and the vegetables were wrapped in a leek leaf. So it was like this beautiful stack of gorgeousness with some little fennel shards on top.
Nice.
And then the dessert, I should say dessert, not pudding, because we have an American audience.
Right.
Was crème anglaise with île flottant.
Yum. It's lunchtime here. It's dinner for y'all, I guess.
But MasterChef was one of the greatest experiences of my. It was harder than finals. It was harder than finals at Oxford doing MasterChef. I'm not joking.
Is your master chef, is Gordon Ramsay the?
No. Gordon Ramsay's nothing to do with MasterChef in the UK. We have a guy called Greg Wallace and John Turode who do it here. But what that show did for me was it just gives you have no fear. You just have no fear of cooking from that point on. And after I won, I wasn't allowed to tell a single soul. And my mother, who had cancer at the time, she said to me, she was alive when I was doing it. And she said to me, Emma, have you won? And I went, I'm not telling you. And she said, I might die. Do you understand? I could die, Emma. I could die before this goes out. And I said, well, you're just going to have to make sure you don't die because I'm not telling you. Because she was a blabbermouth. She couldn't, she was incapable of keeping a secret like that. So she could not be trusted with it. So the day after I won, I went to stay with Richard Curtis, the film director. And Emma Freud, who are friends of mine. So they're friends of mine. They have this lovely house in Suffolk, and I went to stay with them. And Emma Freud, who is the great granddaughter of Sigmund Freud, she said to me, "Do you fancy cooking for us this evening?" And I said, "Of course, of course." How many? Thinking she'd say 6 because that's how big her family is. And she went, 60? And I went, yeah, okay, fine. And I cooked for 60 people. Like, nah, fine, whatever. Whatever. I can see I'm being asked by someone called Mark, the world record.
Yeah, so that was my next question, the world record.
I amassed the largest kazoo orchestra in the world at the Royal Albert Hall. I filled the Albert Hall and gave everyone a kazoo, and we played Dam Busters, the theme from the film Dam Busters. And we broke the world record.
How many people?
Oh, it was about 4,700 and something. Yeah, but we broke the world record. Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
And that it was a kazoo. I mean, it
was a kazoo.
Yeah, that's just even better.
Yeah, some would say the greatest of all the instruments. Some would say.
So did your mother live to find out that you had won Celebrity MasterChef, or did
she did
the medium
yes thing? She did. Yes, she got to see that happen, so that was good. But she didn't get to see the Kennedys go out. That was sad. That was sad. We actually had to film the pilot of that show 3 weeks after she died, and that was really tough. But that was funny. I sat when she was when she was dying. I read to her the script from the pilot, and she was barely speaking at this point, but she stopped me. She stopped me by putting her hand on my arm, and she just went, you're going to have to change that name because your father still sees her in Sainsbury's." That was pretty much the last thing she said to me.
That's kind of a fabulous last line.
Just, she still got it.
Yes. I love it. I love
She
it.
still got it.
Well, this has been so delightful. Thank you for sharing all of this wonderful craziness with us. Y'all, the book is Letters from Brenda, and it is fabulous. And the audiobook, like I said, is great. Thank you so much, Emma.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Next time, invite me to come out there. I love to come.
We would love to have you in
I'd love to come.
Yes, yes.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great evening. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.